Hi, this is Father Bill W. I am an Episcopal priest in long-term recovery, coming here from Austin, Texas, and welcome to the podcast. If you are a regular listener, welcome you back, and would love to hear from you. If you're enjoying these podcasts, it would really help us to let us know what you like about them, any new directions you'd like us to go in. We would love to hear from you. You can drop me a line at two-way prayer, TWO, two-way prayer @gmail.com. I want to do a little shout out to Mike with Recovery Tapers. He's been helping us for the past 6 months doing two-way prayer workshops on the second Saturday. We did our final one just last week. It was pretty well attended, and we're going to take a little time off for the summer. We will be coming back there. Let's see, I guess in September will be our first one with Recovery Tapers, and going to do a special one at the end of August with the University of the South, Swanee. So if you want information on that, it will be in our newsletter, and that one is going to require registration. It will be free, but you're going to need to register for that. So be sure to write for the newsletter, or go directly to the new website and you can sign up for the newsletter there. And so I guess that's all the business we got. This is the fourth episode we're doing in our series where we're trying to explore the morning devotion of Oxford Group members, early AA members, and they called it their morning quiet time with God. Bill Wilson is quoted as saying he believed AA lost something when it stopped emphasizing this practice. And my experience is that he's exactly right, that this was a powerful part of the early AA experience. And it was, I believe, one of the things that may have helped them achieve sobriety rates a great deal higher than the ones that we're experiencing today, because it's in that transformation process, that linking with God, that intimacy with God, that finding a replacement for the alcohol and the drugs, that's so essential to recovery. And while meetings are helpful, like the study they did in looking at why AA was successful, they said it was the quiet time. It was that morning devotion that was actually more important than the meetings. So in this episode, I want to continue using Dick B's book titled Good Morning as a source for our information. And as I've mentioned previously, Dick can get a little preachy at times, but he still has some of the very best information on early AA history. So the book is Good Morning, and there's a link to it in the show notes. His fourth chapter is titled Quiet Time Roots, and it has lots of important information and some marvelous quotes that can, I think, really help us connect the dots. So let's go ahead and get started. And again, the emphasis here is going to be on how did Frank Buchman kind of patch together the pieces of the program that we know as the 12 steps, because Wilson said Buchman and the Oxford Group were responsible for 10 of them. And that's the great majority. So he took that program that they had and patched it together, put it together in a unique way that took people through a process of transformation. One of the first quotes in the book comes from a conversation that Buchman had with a famous evangelist around the turn of the 20th century. The fellow's name was F.B. Myers. And Myers was an Englishman. He was a preacher, but he was a guy who really walked the walk and not just talked the talk, as we say in the program. And he spoke often at the Keswick Conference, where Buchman underwent his own spiritual conversion. And An important conversation is recorded in Dick's book, and it was a day when Buchman and Myers were having a meeting, and Myers asked Buchman, here's the quote, "Do you let the Holy Spirit guide you in all you are doing?" Buchman replied that he did indeed pray and read the Bible in the morning, and sometimes received inspirations then and at other times in the day. But Meyer persisted. Do you give God enough uninterrupted time, really, to tell you what to do? And like most of us, Bookman's answer would have to be no. Receiving direct guidance from God, it was a foreign concept to him. And it's a pretty foreign concept, I think, to most of us in 12-step fellowships. But any serious study of the history tells us that this listening business, this listening in the morning to hear God's voice and to follow the guidance that one receives, that's the heart and soul of the transformation process. That's how we establish conscious contact with God as we understand God. Eh? Here's what Meyer wrote. It is not necessary to make long prayers, but it is essential to be much alone with God, waiting at his door, hearkening for his voice. No number of meetings, no fellowship with Christian friends, no amount of Christian activity can compensate for the neglect of the still hour. Now, I got to tell you that, prayer and meditation was certainly not my strong suit. I was in the program. I found prayer and meditation even more so, very difficult. And my practice was basically, I'd have my coffee in the morning. I'd read my 24-hour book. I'd ask God for another day of sobriety. And then off I'd go. Listening for God's voice, following God's direct guidance. These were things that I had never been taught in my first 20 years in the AA program. And so I think that it's extremely important that we take another look at our origins, where we came from, why it was successful. And this two-way prayer business goes right to the heart of it. Here's another quote from Meyer. He says, "Obey exactly and immediately the commands of the inner, still, small voice. It can be recognized by the fact that it never alters, never asks questions, but is always direct and explicit. Often it asks for an obedience which is against or above what we might naturally feel disposed to give. Listen to that still small voice, the voice of the Spirit of God." Well, Buchman began listening faithfully, said he devoted about an hour a day to reading, praying, and then listening intently for God's guidance. And much of early AA quiet time practices can be tracked back to F.B. Meyer. He wrote a book called The Secret of Guidance, and I put a link to it. It's free PDF version, again, in the show notes for this episode. So there was one source that a person could listen to God, a person could expect guidance from God. That's the piece that he got from Meyer, and that was new to him. But he got another piece, and that came from a Yale professor by the name of Henry Wright. And he was probably the man most influential in Buchman's life and in the start of the Oxford group. And Wright focused squarely on the importance of finding and doing God's will. And this is where our step 3 comes from, turning our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand God. Garth Lean was sort of the semi-official biographer of Frank Buchman. Lean was a member of the Oxford group himself. And this is what he says about Professor Henry Wright. He says, the central theme of Wright's book, titled The Will of God, was that an individual could, through two-way prayer, listening for guidance as well as talking, find God's will for his life and for the ordinary events of the day. Wright himself set aside half an hour for such listening prayer, first thing every morning. He continues, at such times, and indeed at any time in the day, he declared that what he called luminous thoughts came from God, provided only that the human receiver was clean enough to pick them up. These thoughts Wright wrote down in a notebook and always tried to carry out. So, a couple of points as we see this process coming together. And the first is that two-way prayer is, it's not like going to Las Vegas and putting a few bucks in a slot machine and out comes your answer from God. It's about the depth of the process that starts with surrender, starts with that third step. Most of us are really, really desperate when we come into the program. And what they would do in the early days, Dr. Bob, when he had a drunk in the hospital, he'd get them out of bed and get them onto their knees and have them do a surrender. He didn't care what the words were. What he cared about was that they opened themselves up to a new dimension of reality. God, if there is a God, whoever you are, I need your help. That's the gift of desperation that we bring to this process. And that opens the door, you see? That opens the door. So there's the surrender. There's the surrender. And if that surrender continues and stays strong, the second piece that Buchman pulled together was that guidance is going to come to an individual like that God has a plan for us and he will reveal that plan to us. And it's not like a secret thing. It's like I believe God wants us to become fully the people we are meant to be, and that there is a part of us already that is aware of that is in contact with God. The big book says what? The great reality is within. Well, that great reality is pushing us and pulling us and prompting us. And if we open ourselves up to that great reality, it will communicate with us. People have no trouble recognizing that in their minds they have a critic who lives there, who talks to them, who says terrible things to them. They don't think they're going crazy to have that voice in their head. Well, Oxford Group people, early AAs, believed there was another voice, and that was the voice of God. And by living a surrendered life and entering into this prayer practice each morning in particular, that voice would lead and guide and prompt us. Long time before I knew that the meditations in the 24-hour book I was reading were actually the two-way prayer writings from two women in England who were members of the Oxford group. Buchman said this listening to God is not the experience of a few men. It's the most sane, normal, healthful thing a person can do. I'm absolutely convinced from my clinical reactions, both at Princeton and in other places, that it is possible for babes in Christ to have this experience. Sometimes I'm asked, well, when do you teach somebody how to do two-way prayer? And this is I mean, the steps are great. I love the steps. They saved my life. I'm not against them sometimes people feel I might be, but I'm not. But my fear is don't get caught in them. Get through them, do them as intently as possible, and then really get to 10, 11, and 12 where you can start living them. And that's when life and recovery really start coming alive, and all of the principles are present in those last three steps. So when do you start doing the two-way prayer? I think as early as possible. Now, you don't need to wait till you've worked mechanically through them. Uh, Oxford Group had no steps. They hadn't really no process, but the center of the process was this surrender to God and then receiving guidance. So you can ask God, show me my defects of character when I'm sitting down to write a fourth step. Then it's not an analysis of myself. It's you show me, and be prepared, because you will be shown. That voice will start saying to you, uh, Bill, you need to look at this area. Oh, God, that's not an area I want to go to. That's the area you need to go to. That's the secret that you're carrying, and it won't be vindictive. It won't be vicious. It will be leading you, uncovering, discovering uh, the hidden parts within, the shadow parts. Meditate on honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love. That's how they did their fourth step, what we would call a fourth step. Where am I being honest? God, show me where I'm being dishonest. Show me where I'm being impure. Show me where my life is out of whack with what you would have me do. Ask God to show you the right person to do the fifth step with. Guidance can and should be the expectation that I think when the book says more will be revealed, this may be part of what it is referring to. Um, One of the key members of the Oxford Group was a newspaper writer. His name was A.J. Russell, and Russell had started off as being a critic of the Oxford Group and a real critic of Frank Buchman. And he went to one of the gatherings at Oxford University where the students were there and Bookman was working with them. And he went to write a negative article, but he found himself being won over by Bookman and by the process. Wrote a book called For Sinners Only. I'll put that in the show notes as well. It's a marvelous book for getting a nice overview by a good writer of what this Oxford Group movement process was really all about. And this is how he describes what he saw at one of the Oxford Group meetings that he attended. So he says this: "Here I had my first practical experience of the quiet time, a first principle of the group and one of the biggest obstacles to the newcomer, but a principle on which the group can make no compromise. Guidance must come to all those who surrender to God's will. As the quiet time was announced, the undergraduates fumbled for pencils and guidance books and began to listen in to God. This was not simple meditation, which may be concentration on some aspect of Christ or the gospel, but something more, a listening for definite message applicable to present needs. As they were committed to doing God's will, that will could be known for them at any moment of necessity." I've been doing two-way prayer workshops for a number of years now, and I'm always amazed at how quickly, with just a little bit of guidance, prompting, maybe better, most people are able to tune in to that reality, to that voice. They're able to hear it. They're able to experience it as a part of their mind. Um, it just amazes me, and the voice always sounds so familiar. Listen to one, I listen to another. goes by different names, but the voice is always the same. It's loving, it's encouraging, it's supportive, it's unconditional love, and and giving courage to the person to go beyond where they are. Um, One of the names for God I really love is the beyond that is within. And so it's leading me to the beyond. And I'm scared and I want to stay within, but it's leading me. Uh, Someone else described it as the part of ourselves that is already in contact with God. See, but the ego is not. The ego is there assuming godlike powers. And what you do in this process is the ego parks itself to one side, and I allow the voice to come up. See, um, Jack Winslow was another prominent Oxford Group member. He was also a very prolific author, and Dick quotes pretty extensively from his book, The Morning Quiet Time. And that book is usually available through initiatives of change. That's the Oxford Group as it exists today. It's gone through a number of name changes. Um, Headquarters are in Co, Switzerland. I've visited over there a couple of times, and the book is usually available on their website, Initiatives of Change. But I checked it out, and apparently they've kind of shut down the bookstore for the COVID thing, and it's very expensive to buy it. I saw it was $175 uh, for a copy of the book on the open market. Um, I better find my copy before it disappears. Anyway, Winslow writes some interesting things that I think can be helpful on this. He says this: if we want power in our lives, remember, lack of power is our dilemma. If we want power in our lives, victory over the things that get us down, and the invigorating sense of adequacy for any tasks or situations that await us through the day, we must let the Spirit of God recharge us morning by morning. The morning watch with God is also the surest guarantee of progress. If I appear to stand exactly where I did a year ago, it must mean that I have been missing all those things which God was waiting to teach and give me. In my own experience, this kind of stagnation is most often due to the fact that my quiet times with God have become formal and uncreative. Since I learned morning by morning to commit the day to God, to try to see His plan for each day so far as He chooses to show it, and to wait for whatever orders He might wish to give me, life has had for me a thrill and a purpose such as it never had before. The quiet hour with God in the early morning is also a sure secret of inward peace. I have risen from bed with a sense of anxiety or worry, perhaps troubled about definite problems for which I could see no solution, perhaps haunted by that vague sense of depression about nothing in particular, which so many experience in the early morning. I have entered on my quiet tryst with God, and in the stillness, as I have committed myself with all my anxieties to God, peace has stolen back into my soul. And finally, he says, the stress on this watch with God as the morning watch is of vital importance. It is the time when we are most free from distractions. The early morning is also the time when our minds should be at their freshest. There is something in our psychological makeup which makes us peculiarly susceptible to deeper intuitions in our first minutes of reawakened consciousness. Uh, Sometimes people want to argue and say, well, I don't do it in the morning. I do it at night. I do it during the day. I do it when I can grab 5 minutes here or that. Now, you're missing out on something. Uh, get yourself an alarm clock. Get yourself up a half hour earlier than you're accustomed to. Be by yourself, alone. But then you find out you're not alone. You find out that there's another presence within you, and in this work, you're going to open yourself up to that presence, and that presence will make itself known to you. Um, do it for 30 days is what I say in the workshops, and you'll be pretty committed to this for the rest of your life. It's just an amazing process. So the last quote that I want to end with is in this chapter. It's taken from Frank Buchman himself, and it's from a 1935 speech that Buchman delivered in Denmark to a crowd of some 35,000 people. And Buchman was speaking to them about the miracle of radio and how people were learning to communicate in wholly new ways. This is what he said in part. We accept as commonplace a man's voice carried by radio to the uttermost parts of the earth. Why not the voice of the living God as an active, creative force in every home, every business, every parliament? Men listening to a king when he speaks to people over the air. Why not to the King of Kings? He is alive and constantly broadcasting. The Holy Spirit is the most intelligent source of information in the world today. He has the answer to every problem. Everywhere, when men will let him, he is teaching them how to live. Divine guidance must become the normal experience of ordinary men and women. Any man can pick up divine messages if he will put his receiving set in order. Definite, accurate, adequate information can come from the mind of God to the minds of men and women. Frank, this, he ends, is normal prayer. Kind of takes some of the mystery out of prayer and meditation. It's just taking that time in the morning to show up right-sized, and that means the ego is getting ready to park itself to one side to allow something deeper to come from within. We take our problems to God and we ask him for the guidance that we need. Just a couple of quotes here, straight from the big book, that maybe brings, if you understand this process, if you understand that they're talking about two-way prayer, then the big book message becomes less elusive on step 11. I was to test my thinking by the new God consciousness within. Common sense would thus become uncommon sense. I was to sit quietly when in doubt, asking only for direction and strength to meet my problems as he would have me. Whenever we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. We ask that we be given strength and direction to do the right thing. Here we ask God for inspiration and intuitive thought to direct our thinking. We find that our thinking will, as time passes, be more and more in the realm of inspiration. Some 28 years ago, my program was getting stale. I had 20 years sober at that time. Was I hope a good member of AA, active and doing the deal, but it was getting stale, and that was when two-way prayer came into my life and opened me up to a whole new level of consciousness, a new level of contact with a reality beyond myself that was also within myself. So let me close with one more quote, and this is from Dr. Bob and the good old timers, and it just refers to how Dr. Bob himself put this work uh, into action in his life. This is what it says: Dr. Bob's morning devotion consisted of a short prayer, a 20-minute study of a familiar verse from the Bible, and a quiet period of waiting for directions as to where he that day should find use for his talents. Having heard, he would rigorously go about his Father's business, as he put it. One of the things I do at the end of my quiet time, if I have a problem, and I often do, that's the focus of my quiet time. But at the end of receiving that guidance, I do what the big book says. And I think what Dr. Bob is referring to in this little passage here. I look at the day ahead. I see if somebody comes to mind, if there's something I should do, if there's something I've been neglecting, if there's something very specific that God wants me to do during this next 24 hours. I write that down in my guidance book, put a little box next to it, because the next day I'm going to reread that piece of guidance and I'm going to see if I was obedient or if I was not. It's not a to-do list. It's a guidance list. And there's something very different about performing maybe the simplest of acts, maybe calling somebody or reading something or even doing something relaxing, that I'm not doing it by myself and I'm not doing it under my own power. I'm doing it as part of my guidance. Uh, Rightly or wrongly, as the book says, sometimes when we're new at this thing, we may do some foolish things, but God takes pleasure in our willingness to do his will. So I hope some of this has been helpful. And I thank you for listening. And God bless. And hope you'll keep coming back.